Hey, you like monster girls? Don't answer that. Today we're talking about GriMagia. In the world of GriMagia, you take up the role of a Grimeister. Grimeister is a player who is trying to take control of their opponent's monsters or knock them out of the battle. To do so, you use, what else? Adorable monster girls. The game is built around 2 to 6 players, and a unique thing about this game as opposed to other games of the variant is everybody will be drawing from the same pool of cards. It's not so much a deck building game as it is a hand building game. Begin the game by handing out 6 cards to each player. If you're playing with 5 or 6 players, then just make it 5 instead. You're going to want dice handy for this game. You'll only need 1 for each player playing. You're going to start by putting it on 5 for all players. This represents your life total. At the beginning of your turn, you'll want to take all of your rested cards and make them active. Of course, during the first turn of the game, you won't have any cards in play, so you can go ahead and skip this step. Next up is the draw phase. Every turn, you'll draw 2 cards from the top of the deck and put them in your hand. Although during your very first turn, you won't be drawing any cards. This applies to all of the players and not just the player going first. Once you've played all the cards you wish to for the turn, you can begin your attack phase. Your attack phase is when your monsters you have in play will begin attacking other monsters or attacking other players. I'll get into a bit more detail again later in the video. Once all attacks have been declared, you can begin your end phase. During the end phase, you pass play to the player to your left. Count the number of cards in your hand. If you happen to have more than 6, then you have to discard until you only have 6 cards in your hand. Now that you know how turns work, let's get into a bit more about our cards. This is a monster card. Monsters are the main types of cards you'll be seeing in the game. You'll see 2 heart counters in the top left representing the monster's life and also how much the monster costs while it's on your field. You can have a maximum of 8 hearts worth of monsters on your field, not including lost hearts or bonuses. For example, if I have Mandragora in play, I can have another 2, a 1, and a 3 in play. Having these 4 monsters equals 8 hearts exactly, so I have a legal field. If I have more than this in play through various effects, then I take 1 damage at the beginning of each of my turns for having too many cards. If I do, however, have these cards in play, then I can no longer play monsters from my hand until I get rid of some of the monsters on the field. Again, these monsters taking damage and losing life will not decrease how much they are worth on the field. This is a good time to talk about monster colors. You'll notice there's blue, green, and red. Blue represents defensive monsters. They'll normally have very high defense, very low attack, and they'll just generally be really tanky. You'll have green monsters which normally have a bit of life. They've got very even stats and normally have some kind of really nice effect. Then you have red monsters who normally have much higher attack than they have defense, and their attacks are normally about dealing damage. In addition to the hearts, you'll sometimes see these little black symbols. The black symbols represent what type of effect that monster will have. In the case of this arrow, when this card is played, it gets some kind of effect. When you see these arrows in a circle here, it means it's a continuous effect that's always in play. When you see this fist, it means it's a trigger effect, so it'll trigger in response to something else happening. And if you see this, whatever it's supposed to be here, then you can rest this in order to get its effect. If you don't see a black symbol here, then don't worry about it. It means it's just a straight vanilla card with just stats. The monster's effect text will be displayed here. Each monster will have different effect text if it has one of the black symbols. You can see its attack here, and its defense here. You'll also notice that the monster has a symbol here, representing some kind of buff it can give to another monster. You see, monsters don't have to fight on their own. If you take one monster and flip it over, you can use it to give stats to another monster. For example, in this case, having her like this gives my gargoyle plus 1 HP. Different monsters will give different boosts depending on what type of monster they are. Since this is an HP monster, it gives HP. However, if I were to take this gargoyle and flip it over, now my Mandragora has plus 2000 defense and a special bonus effect that happens when it's defensive. There's another type of monster cards called SP monsters. These monsters don't actually hit the field as regular monsters. You can tell because they don't have regular stats like HP, attack, and defense. However, by using what we were just talking about, they can be attached to another monster and given some kind of effect. When monsters are summoned, they gain something called a summoning aura. The summoning aura means that it cannot be captured, it cannot attack, and it cannot be unioned. This of course means that during your first turn you will not have the choice of unioning. You'll have to summon a monster, and then during your next turn, summon a new monster, and then you can union the monster that you played before. Again, this monster cannot be unioned because it was just played this turn. During our next turn, we can again, of course, play a new monster and union the past monster. I should also mention that the union monsters don't have their hearts count towards your total. They're just regular supports. You can have one monster union to another monster at a time. In-play monsters have two states, active and rested. An active monster can choose to attack, defend, or use its effect, if it has one, by resting itself. Not all monsters have to rest to use their effect. Make sure to read your cards and look for this symbol. This symbol here means that they have to rest to use their effect, so if you use their effect, you can't use them to attack or defend. When a monster becomes rested, its defense points go down to 0, so be careful with your high defense monsters, you might not want to attack with them. When choosing monsters to attack with during the attack phase, you have to select all of the monsters you wish to attack with at once. Then you can select targets. You can have each monster attack either another monster or a player directly. After you've selected your attackers, your opponent can select whether or not they want to defend with any of their characters. Let's say, for instance, that Dullahan here is attacking the Minotaur. If I wish, I can defend with the Cursed Doll by resting her. Now, the Dullahan is attacking the Cursed Doll instead of the Minotaur, so we'll compare the 5,000 here to the 4,000 here. Because the Dullahan has more attack than the Cursed Doll will take 1 damage. In this case, the Cursed Doll would be defeated since it only has 1 heart. However, if we were to take that and switch it with something like the Slime, who has 2 hearts, then the Slime would simply lose 1 heart and still have 1 remaining. If you attack a player, however, and the player does not defend with any of their monsters, then their HP goes down by 1. Each monster attacking a player directly will deal 1 damage in almost all cases. If you're in a match with 3 or more players, then you can choose to defend for other players if you need to keep a certain player alive. Let's talk a little more about Union. So one thing that I didn't say about Union is if you have 2 monsters in play, then you can actually choose to union the monsters you have in play rather than play new monsters to union with. As we discussed before, different colors will have different kinds of stat boosts. The red monsters will give attack, the blue monsters will give defense, and the green monsters will give HP. Monsters can only be unioned with one other monster at a time, so choose your union partner carefully because it's going to be stuck there for a while. Some of my more eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed that there are words written here where the numbers are. This means that if you attach this to a character of the same color, it gets a special ability. Blue gets counter, red gets pierce, and green gets undamage. In order to get these effects, you have to attach the character to a character that has the same color. So for example, if I attach this angel to this slime here, my slime can now use the ability counter. However, if I attach this Lamia here, I do get the +1 HP, but I do not get the ability undamage because it's not the same color. To go a little more in depth, the undamage ability lets you get rid of the next damage that would be able to target creature or player by discarding this card. It has to be a support when you use this effect. Although keep in mind that when you get rid of this card, the monster it's attached to will lose this +1 HP bonus, so don't end up killing your own monster. Counter will allow you to redirect the damage that is being dealt to it. So if you're defending with a monster, you can discard the support card in order to redirect the damage back to the attacking source. Pierce allows you to bring one monster's total defense down to 0. This is useful if you're attacking a monster that's not rested. In addition to those abilities, you'll also see black abilities like this one. This has the effect of Squall. All of these are different, and it really depends on which one you're playing for what effect it has. But for example, this one has Rest. If this card is unioned, you may choose a player, then discard a card from that player's hand without looking. So this is a very unique ability, and Sylph is the only one you'll see with this one. Okay guys, here's where things get a little bit complicated, so bear with me. This game uses a capture system as one of its win conditions. In order to capture a monster, you have to play a Grimoire of the same type as the monster that you're attacking. So let's say this Mandragora here. In order to capture, I need a green book. Now, here's how capturing works. You declare the monster that you want to capture, so this Mandragora here, and then you'll notice that this book has 1 MP. Well, in order to use this to capture this monster, I need to bring it up so its MP is higher than the number of hearts that this Mandragora has. So since this Mandragora has 2 hearts, and this is only worth 1 MP, I need to bring it up to at least 2. You can do this by discarding 1 card of the same color. I play a green HP book, and I discard Jiangxi in order to bring this to 3 MP. Now that my MP is higher than the total number of hearts, I can capture this monster. Attempting to capture this Mandragora isn't the end of it though. My opponent can now choose to try and stop my attempt. So you'll notice that the 3 colors I stated before are kind of like grass, water, and fire. Well, the reason I said that is because when you're trying to block a capture attempt, you can do it by using a card of an opposing element. So for example, if we think of this green HP as grass, then we would need a red card, a fire card, in order to stop it. So if my opponent is trying to capture my Mandragora with this green book, then I can put a red card over it to stop the attempt. Now that I've done this, the person who's trying to capture can try to get rid of my card so that their attempt goes through. Since we've gone green, red, obviously the next one we're going to go is blue. Now that I've played this blue card, I'm going to attempt to capture again, because these 2 are canceling each other out. In order for my opponent to block this final card, my opponent has to have blue's weakness. We know that green is weak to red, red is weak to blue, so obviously blue is weak to green. If I happen to have this green card here in my hand, then the capture attempt is unsuccessful, and a capture cannot be attempted on that player's monsters again that turn. If you're playing a game with more than 2 people, then you are welcome to try and capture 1 monster from each player in the game 1 time per turn. This is the part that players seem to have trouble with, so let's go over it one more time. I play this green book on Mandragora. I've only got 1 MP and this has 2 hearts. I discard Cyclops in order to give it 3 MP, which is enough to tempt the capture. My opponent plays a red Harpy over it to attempt to block the capture. Now, I play this blue Raven here so that the capture attempt continues to go through. My opponent has 1 last chance to play a green card and stop the capture altogether. My opponent pulls a green butterfly, I apologize, and now the capture is just done. I can try again on another player or on my next turn. A lot of players seem to have trouble grasping when to stop. Like, this seems like something that could go on forever, but you can think of it this way. After the first book has been played, once one of each of the other elements has been played, then the chain is done. And the blocker is meant to win in these situations. So once the blocker is successfully blocked 2 times, then it's just done. You'll have to wait 1 more turn to get the capture off. One other thing I'll mention is you can discard books in order to power up your MP as well. These are considered blue cards, these are considered red cards, and these are considered green cards. So if I didn't have a blue monster in my hand, but I did have 2 blue books, then I could play 1 blue book and get rid of 1, and bam, this is up to 3 MP. Now let's move on to the last card, and I promise this is a lot easier. These are Relics. Relics are sort of instant cast cards that can go off pretty much at any time in response to anything. So, for example, we have the War Gods fan here, which is choose a monster on the field and return it to its original owner's hand. So, I can use this during my turn, during my opponent's turn, I can use it during the attack phase, the block phase, I can use it whenever I want to. So if I'm attacking with a monster and my opponent chooses to defend, I can use this to get rid of the defending monster. Or if my opponent plays something I'm not expecting to get rid of one of my monsters, I can play this to put that monster back in my hand, then it's not gone anymore. There's a lot of different uses to things like this, so keep an eye out for them. There's another type of relic called the equipment. Equipment acts exactly the same way. You can play it whenever you want to, and when it comes into play, it attaches itself to a monster and stays in play. When you're playing a normal relic, you play it one time and it goes to the discard pile. But when you're playing an equipment, you give it to a monster, and all of a sudden that monster now has that effect. A monster can have equipment cards and also support cards, so you don't have to worry about having a union monster and not being able to give it an equipment card. One last thing about equipment cards. You're allowed to have as many equipment cards on one monster as you want to. So if you want to stack up 2 or even 3 equips on one monster, go for it. It's totally up to you. I do have to warn you, however, that if for some reason Dullahan happens to go back to my hand, let's say through the effect of War God's Fan, then all of the attached equipment cards go to the discard pile. So what do I think of GriMagia as a game? Honestly, I'm pretty impressed with it. For one thing, the artwork is absolutely fantastic. I think this game is probably one of the best looking card games that I've seen, and it was a Kickstarter game. I can't even believe it. It's got a pretty simple battle system, so a lot of people can get into it if you explain the rules to them. This game is going for $40, and a lot of people are going to say at $40, it's one deck of cards, it's 100 cards, but if you think about it, like a Weiss Schwarz trial deck is, what, like $20 for 50 cards? This is $40 for 100 cards, and the cool thing about this game is once you buy yourself a deck, you're set. You don't have to buy any more cards for pretty much the lifespan if you don't want to. I'm sure new cards will come out, and you'll want to get your hands on those too if you're really liking the game, but if you have one deck of these cards, then it's not something where every player has to go out and buy their own cards. It's kind of like a deck building game, but it's even simpler, and it should be a lot easier to bring on like trips and stuff. As far as like player base goes, just the beautiful artwork by itself I could see a lot of players getting into. Yeah, they do try to do the whole sex sells thing. I mean, they're monster girls. Obviously, you're going to get some panty shots and some cleavage here and there, but it's not so much that I think it ruins the game for anybody who would really, like, care about that kind of stuff. Like, if you've got a girlfriend or something, I'm sure she could play this game just fine. But with the good, obviously, comes the bad, and we're going to talk about that too. So, for one thing, the game is a little too complicated for what I want it to be. I understand that he was trying to go for a more... It's like a casual game, but it's a casual game with some depth and strategy. But there are so many, what I see as unnecessary rules, that I feel like it sort of killed the experience when I was playtesting the game with my friends. For one thing, the abilities... The fact that you have to discard these in order to have the effect go off, a lot of people forgot about these, and that was kind of a problem. The capture system, a lot of people, like, I'll get onto the capture system in a second, but the capture system wasn't really clicking with a lot of people. The whole, like, summon aura thing, people weren't really clicking on that. I don't think the game would be too broken if you just took the summoning aura out and, like, let players union on the first turn that a monster was summoned, and maybe you just made it so, like, when a monster's summoned it can't be, like, it can't attack. I think that'd be fine. But, like, they took it kind of a step further and they made a bunch of other different rules around it. I'm not necessarily saying that this is a horrible thing for the card game. If you're trying to make a competitive card game, I understand that you have to make some kind of rules and limitations because that's what makes the card game fun. Especially with something like this, where it's already so casual that you want to add those extra elements of depth and strategy for players who want to take the game more seriously. So, getting on to the other thing, and I'm sorry, I gotta play bad guy here real quick. The capture system. So, this sucks. It sucks that, no, I'm not saying that the capture system sucks. I'm saying, like, it sucks that I have to sort of play the bad guy here. Not many of the people that I played with liked the capture system, and it hurts. I know, it's awful. The capture system is the most unique thing about the game, and it's kind of like the game's selling point.
I don't think I said it in the video, but if you capture 3 monsters, you win. And this caused a lot of problems. First of all, if you're playing with the maximum amount of players, which is 6, I believe, nobody wants to capture, because as soon as you capture something, you become target list for everybody. So everybody got these in their hand, and like as soon as, I think in one of my first test games, somebody captured a monster. As soon as they captured the monster, they were dead by the time they got a next turn. Just because everybody was afraid, they were 1 point up and nobody else had a point, so everybody just swarmed that player and completely took him out of the game. And obviously you get around this by just not capturing, but then why have it there if it's not going to get used? Like, capturing, it's a good idea, it's a really cool idea, and it really sets this game apart from other games. It's just that the player bases that I played with didn't find it very fun. Obviously, if this capture system got through, then the people at Melon Seed Games obviously knew what they were doing. So there have to be people out there who enjoyed this kind of gameplay, and it's probably the players who took it a little more competitively. But the players that I played this game with were mainly people who were like, oh wow, let me look at those cards, oh those are really cool, they're really pretty. Like this, can I play this? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. If you're going to have something that reaches such a broad audience, I don't know if something like the capture system was really the way to go. So, my friends and I actually, we ended up taking this capture system, and I got the best results when we either A, took it out of the game completely, or B, changed it to make it super simple. One of the game variants that we played actually was using a capture card allowed you to take a monster and place it in your hand, but at the cost of giving a monster up. Let me see if I can find some cards here to give you an example of exactly how that played out. This was probably the best version of the capture system that we had. So let's say, for example, there's this Raven chick, yeah? She's on the field, and I have a blue book and this fairy in my hand. I would play the blue book, I would discard the fairy, and it would put the Raven into my hand. I took out the whole capture 3 to win the game completely, and it made the game a little more streamlined, I would say. One other thing that the capture system sort of does is it kind of makes the game last forever. There's nothing wrong with a card game that lasts a long time, but for the kind of card game this is, like, players were spending like an hour and a half to 2 hours playing this, and that's just too long. Like, after a while, you just kind of want to start a new round. But this kind of game really sort of, it makes it difficult to be like a defensive player, and you want to be aggressive, but instinctively you don't want to be aggressive, because if you're aggressive then everybody's going to try to take you out first. So it led to a lot of people drawing their 2 cards for the turn and then ending their turn without attacking or doing anything. Ugh, awkward cut. So this is something I thought of after the actual video was done recording. One huge complaint that I got about the capture system, and one thing that I didn't talk about, was the fact that players complained a lot that they couldn't attack and then capture, and I kind of agreed with them. So if you guys really wanted this to be a competitive strategy-ish game, having the ability to attack a monster, bring it down to 1 MP, and then try to capture it would have been very helpful. A lot of players tried to do that, and we had to stop them a lot, because in their minds, in order to capture a monster, you needed to be at 1 MP, so they would attack a monster, bring it down to 1 heart, and then try to capture it. But by the time you've attacked, your chance to capture is already gone. So we actually played a few variants where you could capture after you've attacked, and we pretty much moved the capture into its own phase after the attack phase, and it actually worked out a lot better. So just something to consider for like future releases and stuff. And yeah, I guess I'll just awkwardly cut back to the video. This is going to vary from player to player, so don't be discouraged by anything that I'm telling you here. I'm just letting you know what the results of my testing were. Keep in mind that I did play this game with a few casual gamers. I did play this game with some people who don't really play card games, because the game, it's people who aren't really into card games were very interested in playing GriMagia, and that's one of its draws. It's a learning curve if you're playing with people who don't really get into card games. So that's all I'll really say about the capture system. There were some other variants we played, one of the variants being like, if you played one of the books, then it just sent the monster to the discard pile. I don't think it breaks the game that much, but it's, you know, just sort of a way to get around it being so complicated. So overall, I was very impressed with this game. It's simple enough that people who aren't really into card games can get into it, especially because of the absolutely awesome artwork. Seriously, great job on the artwork, guys. The capture system did make the game a little more complicated than it needed to be, but I think there's enough of a simple learning curve that if you're playing with people who are even moderately into card gaming, it's not going to be that big of a deal. I recommend, if you've got a group of at least 3 to 4-ish players, just all of you pitch in and pick up a copy of this game. I'll have links to where you can get this game in the description box, so if you don't see it there yet, then I probably just haven't gotten the links yet. Just keep checking back, I'll have it there soon. If you enjoyed this video, please leave it a like. Those things really do help us out. Leave me your thoughts on the game, as well as suggestions on what I should do next in the comments section below. And finally, subscribe to stay up to date on the latest Kudo news. Enjoy your card games, nerds!